This is Ashley Eckstein, Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee, this is said on podcast a lot, but it has been far too long since we've had this returning guest. He, not only is he a longtime longtime friend of the show.
Both.
I appreciate that. But
I started out as a fan.
Oh, I like that even more. But more importantly, he is my dear friend. He is truly like a brother. It is the one and only Jeff McGee. Jeff, always a pleasure to have you back on Coffee with Kenobi.
Thanks, Dan. And it hasn't been that long since I've been on, but it's been too long since we've discussed this topic. I was shocked when you told me it was 2021 the last time.
Yeah, we've been going through the Kenner lists of all the figures and ranking them, our favorite ones. So we had our first one we did was Coffee with Kenobi show number 260. They came out February 7th, 2019. And then we didn't go back to this again until CWK 287. And that was the second half of the Star Wars wave. Then we did, show 394 with The Empire Strikes Back, show 410, the second part of The Empire Strikes Back. And then the last time we did this Coffee with Kenobi show 454, Return of the Jedi action figures part 1. So yes, as you mentioned, we've been on plenty of times, naturally. In fact, you were once a host of the show while Corey was off getting his degree. And so that's pretty cool. So we're back to do this thing. We're going to talk about the second, basically, Jeff, help explain to people, because figures were released in waves. The wave thing is pretty much gone the way of the dodo, right? But how were figures released back in the 80s?
So what would happen is usually about once a year you would get a new set of figures. And with Star Wars being, they were 3 years in between, there was a revolving door of figures coming out to kind of keep the line alive and keep interest in it alive. And what we found was it worked well between Empire and Jedi because they just kept releasing, different figures, different aliens and everything. When it came time for Jedi to come out, they released figures in 83, right before the movie came out. They released some more after the movie came out, probably about 6 months after. And then in 84 and going into 85, they released, they're called the last 17, and that's sort of a misnomer because the last part of the line was the Power of the Force, and this came out in 1985.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a line where they released figures from Return of the Jedi that hadn't been released yet, but they also went back and released figures from earlier films, mostly Star Wars, and we're to sort of fill in the gaps. And the hope was that they would keep going after that, and there just wasn't the interest. So where we're at now, we're at the last half of the Return of the Jedi card. There was another set after this. So what we're talking about is the rest of the figures that were on the 65 back card. There were also 79 back cards and 92 back cards. And those 92 back cards are all the figures that came out on the Power of the Force. So we basically got one more round of Return of the Jedi figures.
After this
one. Mm-hmm. So this time we're talking about the last 9 figures that were on that 65 back card.
Yeah, so please let us know what those 9 figures are.
Okay, so if you're looking at a 65 back card back, we're talking about figures numbered 5 through 13. That's going to be the Biker Scout, the Imperial Biker Scout, I should say, Bib Fortuna, the Indoor Rebel Trooper, the Gamorrean Guard, Logray the Ewok Medicine Man, Chief Chirpa, Admiral Akbar, the first Klaatu, which had the soft goods like loincloth, and Nien Num, however you pronounce it. I always say 9 because that's how the guy in the commercial said it when I was a kid. Those are the 9 that we're going to be pulling our top 5 list from this evening.
Yeah. Just give me some overall thoughts on these particular figures.
Well, I'm going to echo a lot of the things I said last time. These were the figures that, to me, really epitomized the leaps and bounds that Kenner took in quality from not only from Star Wars to Jedi, but even from Empire to Jedi. You've got this line has some figures where they were really taking some chances. And we'll talk about them a little bit as we go along. But Bib Fortuna, the Gamorrean Guard, the Ewoks, and Admiral Akbar, to me, are really the ones that they gambled on, because they would be kind of a hard sell to somebody who's just walking down a toy aisle and wasn't really that familiar with the film or the characters.
Yeah.
So this is one that this is a subset that I'm really intrigued by.
I am too. I will say, of all of the lines we've discussed so far, this or as far as releases that we've discussed so far, and I just said all the different shows, this particular group is my least favorite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I actually struggled coming up with 5.
Wow.
To be honest,
okay.
I know, isn't that wild? Yeah. So
what is it about this that just doesn't flip your whopper, as our friend Trisha Barr would say?
That's right. Well, I think that'll come up through the discussion.
Okay.
Actually,
okay.
But if it doesn't fully come up, ask me again, because I guess, well, there's no core characters. There's no Han. There's no Luke. There's no Leia, right? There's some standouts, but yeah, like I said, I think we'll get to it. Why don't you go first? What is your number 5?
All right, and I would like to just note that you did say, "Ask me again sometime."
Of course,
what you told me. Yes. So my number 5 is going to be Chief Chirpa. Now,
okay.
I've never been somebody who hated on the Ewoks. I didn't even realize that they weren't cool until I went to my first convention in around 98, 99, somewhere around in there, maybe even as late as 2000. That's when I first realized that Ewoks weren't cool and that everybody loved Boba Fett. I had no idea.
Wow.
So Chief Chirpa was, I believe I told this story the last time around. The first set of figures that I got consisted of General Madine, Chief Chirpa, and a third figure that I cannot remember. I want to say maybe it was a biker scout. But Chief Chirpa was my first Ewok. And that's one reason he's my number 5. But one of the reasons is his hood is so well sculpted and fits over his head so perfectly that I almost didn't realize it would come off, because it looks like it's molded onto him so well. And of all of the Ewoks, I feel like he is sort of the best example overall of an Ewok. Of an Ewok figure, at least, because he's got the belt going around him, and I love the way that they sculpted the Ewoks. There's hair and fur draped over the belt, so it looks like he's got fur belt loops, and he's got this really nice long stick. But the main draw for me again was just the head sculpt. He looks like he's ticked off about something, and that cowl, the hood that they made, and all of the Ewok hoods are awesome because they're asymmetrical. They look like they were made by a primitive culture using semi-primitive tools. And so that everything about this figure just says Ewok to me. And I love that he's the one that's kind of in charge. And when his backstory came out a few years later, where he had taken part in some intergalactic doings, it just always made me giggle. But those are all the reasons that Chief Chirpa is my number 5.
All right, so I'm going to say 2 things that I say every time that Jeff is on and we talk about figures. One, my list, and I'm sure Jeff's list too, is not our ranking of how much we enjoy these characters or their time in the stories. It's more like the figures themselves, just based on their artistic merit, our memories with them, how they look, just all stuff like that. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Yes. And number 2, more importantly, is there anyone better to talk about toys with than Jeff McGee? I mean, you just heard a perfect example. Outstanding.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. No, it's true. It's a delight to sit back and listen to you. I'm not going to be as eloquent with my number 5, because I didn't come up with a number 5 until we hit record. Because, like I said, I had a hard time. My top 4 weren't too bad, but my 5th one was difficult because none of these really stand out to me. Like if I lost any of these figures, I would want to find them because they were my figures, but it wouldn't eat at me like it would if I lost another figure, if that makes sense. That being said,
gotcha. Yeah.
My number 5 for this is 9 Numb. purely because of the face sculpt.
That's a great sculpt, yeah.
His mask, where the way his mouth is, the jawline. If you're people listen to the show, can't tell because you don't have the video, but Jeff can see me, and every time he's talking, I'm looking over my right shoulder because I've got all my Kenner figures in a row on the wall, so I keep looking at them. And when I look at 9-Num, I just think, well, he's ugly looking, because it's not a human, but the way that they made his alien face look, and there's personality behind those soulless black eyes. And again, the jawline, everything about it, the texture, the even like the look and color and the design texture of the clothing, it doesn't look like, it almost looks like it's from a different line, because there's just so much gorgeous detail in it. It's an impressive figure.
It is, and I struggled with keeping him off of my list. He's not on my list. He would have been number 6, really sort of a 5A.
Yeah.
And the reason I love him, everything you said about him is accurate, and I love that face sculpt and everything. But the thing that always draws me to him is his outfit, the bright red like onesie that he's wearing with the navy blue vest offsets it so well. I've always been struck by this figure, and he was one of the ones. There are 2 of these figures that I got as mail-aways. Him, and my number 1 figure were both mail-aways, and I've always loved this figure. And again, I love that he co-piloted the Millennium Falcon, so you kind of have to have him on your list. I should have put him on mine. I just didn't.
I understand. I get it, and I the one you picked for 5, I almost picked for 5.
And it's funny that this part of the line doesn't do much for you, because there's really only one on here that I didn't even consider for my list.
Oh, cool. We'll have to bring that up at the end.
Yeah.
Well, what is your number 4?
My number 4, that's an excellent question. Let me get back to my list. My number 4 is Bib Fortuna. And this one would be higher if his head turned all the way around. But it doesn't. And so the fact that they couldn't work that out drops him a little bit. But the older I get, the more I appreciate this figure and just how creepy he is.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that he's got that nice soft goods jacket that he came with, the long overcoat, kind of a duster.
Yeah.
And it was this really soft, it almost felt like velour, but it wasn't. And you got that, and then he's got this metal like chest/stomach plate that he wore that came with him that you had to snap around him and everything. And this really long stick. And then again, me, I'm going to talk about the color. His outfit that he wore underneath it all was this like deep blue color that was really, really cool. And the thing that I like most about this figure, though, is the fact that the head tails, but they went ahead and they painted his eyes red, slightly red, to match the character in the movie. And he just, again, the older I get, the more I appreciate just how sort of demonic and scary looking he is. And I'm surprised that he didn't creep me out when I was a kid.
That character, I remember in the Return of the Jedi storybook, I think either he or Jabba, I think it's Bib Fortuna, are described as grotesque. And I didn't know what that word meant. So I have him to thank for that. That's a good one. I didn't know what you were going to say. That's a really good one. My number 4 is a little bit different than that. My number 4 is Admiral Akbar.
All right.
I just think he's an extremely unique looking figure. The way his hands look, especially that left one, the way it kind of points up, like he could kind of adjust it into a claw if he wanted to. The head, of course, is very uniquely proportioned to the torso on his body. I feel like it's kind of an engineering feat to make it work. And even it almost still doesn't work, but it doesn't matter because, those great fish eyes and the complete right and left. And a lot of this is just the design of the character anyway. But I think it's hard because in the movie, you only see him in a chair moving around and barely moving his hands. And to see him as an action figure with that really unusual accessory, it's almost like a weird baton thingy. He's cool. He's cool. He's a standout to me in the Return of the Jedi wave. So number 4, Admiral Akbar.
I will reserve all of my comments because he may or may not show up on my list a bit later.
Okay, fair enough. Well, what is, speaking of your list, what is your number 4?
Well, my number 4 was Bib Fortuna.
Oh yeah, number
However,
3. Sorry.
my number
Yes.
3. No, it's all
Yes.
right.
Me can
You-
count.
Well, I know literature is your thing. Counting is
Right.
my thing.
Yes. That's why
my
they're
number
perfect blend.
Which is sad if counting is my thing because well, Bill, I am a Count Jeff, so that makes sense.
Exactly.
See, my number 3 is the Gamorrean Guard, and this one would have been higher on my list were it not for the other two. Had this been in any other wave, he might have been my number 1 because this is to me one of Kenner's triumphs.
Hmm.
This thing is amazing. It would be higher, except he's wearing like these sandals on his feet, and the way he's built, he reminds me of a cousin of mine that I didn't really care for. So that's the only
Hopefully
reason.
they're not a listener.
No. From like the thighs down, looks like this cousin, but from the thighs up, this thing is amazing. And this was one of the ones that I got in like the second batch of figures that I bought. I saved up my allowance and went and bought like 7 figures at a time, and this was one of them. But I couldn't open them until I got my report card and had made all A's. So this guy, and he comes with the vibro axe that we talked about, I think last time, with the Weequay. But the way that they've sculpted the fur on his loincloth, he's got the shoulder pad pauldron things. He's got the fangs on his face. Everything about this thing, he's just huge. He's one of the biggest figures I ever did, and most people probably know this. This mold was reused minus the head in the Robin Hood Prince of Thieves line for Friar Tuck.
Oh yeah, I think I learned that on Talking Toys.
Probably so.
Yeah.
But everything about this figure is just amazing, and this is sort of the epitome of how far Kenner came with these toys from the beginning to where they were at this point, because he looks almost exactly like his film counterpart. He looks closer to his film counterpart than really almost any what's what I'm looking for, any non-mechanical character that we had, any biological alien that we had.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree so much that it is also my number 3.
Nice.
Yeah, when I was growing up, I was called it Gamorrean Guards.
That's what I did the first time, and then I heard somebody say Gamorrean, and I thought that makes more sense.
And it never
was
heard
it both ways.
Said until on the screen until the Mandalorian season 2, the first episode, I believe. But yeah,
when they got skinny, now they're all skinny.
Right.
Like all cut and fit.
Exactly. So this for much of what you said, I was always when I first think of Return of the Jedi, that's one of the figures that stood out to me. Besides the Jedi Luke and some others that I'll talk about, because it's so unique. As you said, it shows how much Kenner had advanced. Obviously, the character is a little bit different, so they had the opportunity to do something with that because the canvas is there. But again, like the fact that he shouldn't be able to stand, and he does because of the way they've contoured it, and the axe was cool, but the face and the horns, I was so drawn to this figure because to me, it very much epitomizes Return of the Jedi, and the fact that we knew a lot of it was going to take place in Jabba's palace, and we got to meet all these funky creatures, and it took the cantina from New Hope and kicked it up to like 11. And the Gamorrean Guard has always been one of the standouts to me because of that. And I still remember seeing it at Toys R Us on the rack and thinking, this is a new Star Wars figure. I don't know what this thing is, but it is so stinking cool. Yeah,
and the Gentle Giant Jumbo version almost won't stay on my wall.
Oh, wow, because it's so heavy?
It's so heavy, yeah.
I believe it. That's cool. I forgot you have gotten a nice collection of those.
Yes.
Very cool. All right, so now I believe we're on your number 2.
My number 2. So this is where I kind of struggled. This is where I was like, I really wanted 9 Numb on the list, but because I had to have the Biker Scout on my list, this is second to the Hoth Snow Trooper as my favorite Stormtrooper. And I love the sculpt and the detail in this one. Plus, he has that really cool gun that we saw for the first time. But the thing about this one that I think is so cool is that we've got the bodysuit. We see so much of his bodysuit. We've got a lot of black showing, and he's basically just got like the knee pads, the knee high boots, and then his chest plate, shoulder pads, and his helmet is all the white that we have. Even his hands are black. And I just really love this figure. And he looks, especially now since Scream came out, I always thought the Scream mask, the ghost face mask, looked like this guy.
Hmm.
And I just really, really like this one. And I love the speeder bike accessory, and you could put him on there. So this, this may actually overtake the Snowtrooper because there's just so much more detail on it. But I don't know. I really like the skirt that the Snowtrooper came with. They both look ghostly. So it's going to be tough. But yeah, the Biker Scout is definitely, of the Return of the Jedi figures, he's my favorite. He's my favorite Stormtrooper. Which I guess that's the only one we got in the Return of the Jedi line. So yeah,
Sure.
it's kind of a toss up between him and the Hoth Trooper. But yeah, that Biker Scout, I just love everything about him. And again, especially that gun. Anytime we get a new gun, I'm really all about it.
Well, unless you count the Royal Guard as a Stormtrooper,
which I don't.
Yeah, fair. Because it's very. I mean, there's a similar kind of tangentially concept of it, but yeah. I like your number 2 so much that it is also my number 2.
Nice.
Yeah. The Biker Scout was something that I actually liked more before I saw the movie. Because it was a new Stormtrooper, which always I thought was fantastic. I would not say it's my second favorite because I would put the AT-AT driver as my second favorite Stormtrooper.
I always forget about the AT-AT driver.
Yeah, they're just the best. But the Biker Scout was such a cool concept because it was a very radically different. I mean, even the Hoth Trooper and the AT-AT driver, they still were close enough. Just the shape of the helmet, I guess, or at least the visor, that it was still Stormtroopery. And this takes it to another level because of the protruding visor, I guess. The fact that underneath it looks like they're wearing some sort of a soft leather or something like that. It's much, much more pronounced, whereas in the other figures, there's more of the white in the plasteel or whatever it's called casing. The gun is also a huge coup, and I love that it could fit so beautifully, well, in Kenner terms, on the speeder bike itself. And now people call it a Scout Trooper, right? But I always think of it as the Biker Scout.
Yeah, a Biker Scout is what I call it, because I think that's what they called it on the
card.
On the card, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that it's Biker Scout for me all the way. Like I said, after I saw the movie, the luster of the Biker Scout went down because they were kind of buffoons, even more than normal Stormtroopers. And they were just like tree fodder, fertilizer.
The only thing they could hit were trees.
Yeah, or Han Solo, yes, in the fist fight, which was a good fist fight. But yeah, I would. It's not higher because it, like I said, the movie, even though it's sort of breaking my rule, it kind of takes it away a little bit. But it's still an undeniably cool looking figure. Now, that being said, when there's like a Black Series 1 or other versions of it, I never feel remotely tempted to buy it because I'm happy with the one I got.
Interesting. Okay, because I do like like I said, I do like the one that came with the Black Series, the 6-inch scale.
Mm-hmm.
I thought looked great, so I've got that one. So
cool.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I someday I hope to be able to come to your house and see all your collection.
Most of my collection is still boxed up. I don't have it on display. My goal, my thought was with this place was I would curate my collection and sort of rotate stuff out. I haven't rotated anything out. I just keep adding stuff and cluttering up the shelves more.
Yeah, I understand. Well, you'll come over sometime and I'll show you what I got going on over here.
Yes, that is a plan.
All right, so here we are.
My
your
number
top one.
This will not surprise anybody based on something I said earlier. My number one is not a trap. It is Admiral Akbar. This was a mail away. It was the first mail away I think that I got from Return of the Jedi, I believe. And it's honestly one of the best sculpts we got of any Star Wars figure. This one stands up to any modern Akbar figure that we've got. Now, obviously they look different and they've got, the sculpts are a little more detailed, but this one, again, to me, I'll put him up against any of them any day of the week. And it helps because his head was so bulbous that they had a lot of space to work with. And you're absolutely right. He's got that one arm. His right arm his hand is closed so he can hold his baton, but his left arm is open so that he could slap somebody down or kind of pet R2-D2. Mm-hmm. And I love his forearms. He's got Popeye forearms. Yes. They're just huge. They're like they're bulging and everything. And I even like the fact I didn't mind the fact that his clothing was white except obviously the sleeves and the legs sort of yellow at a different rate than the torso.
Yeah.
But as you get that sort of, it looks like the little metal apron you wear when you go to like get an X-ray taken. Not metal, but the aprons you have to wear. The
Yes,
really
that
heavy
they place
aprons.
over you. Yeah.
Lead apron. That's what it is. A lead apron. That's what it looks like to me. But I always liked it. But you're absolutely right. Everything about this one, his eye, that like he almost got stalks on his eyes,
Mhm.
and this one had a little trouble standing up. You had to position his arms just right to get him to stand up because the head was so top heavy. But the other thing, and this again, confessions of a fat kid. You remember the I think there were Boston baked beans candies.
Yes.
They had the texture on them. They were that color red, the texture. His head always
Definitely.
reminded me of one of those.
Oh, interesting. Between now you've changed that, and now I see ghost face on every stormtrooper. So you've really,
You're welcome.
yeah, thanks a lot. Okay, that's, you know what's funny? What was your number 4?
My number 4 was Bib Fortuna. Is that your number 1?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes. So my 1 is Bib Fortuna. My 4 is Akbar, and yours were transversed. How fun is that? I picked Bib Fortuna certainly not because he's of the character, because he's a very unsavory character who meets a very undistinguished end, courtesy of Boba Fett. But the two figures that stand out to me for Return of the Jedi are Jedi Luke and Bib Fortuna. Again, I didn't know anything about Bib Fortuna. I just remember seeing this figure, similar to the Gamorrean Guard at Toys R Us, and he was I think it was the first one I opened. It might have been Luke, but if it wasn't the first, it was the second. And the hands are like claws. The Leiku, it's just very pronounced and very distends down, wraps around him so perfectly. The cloth that you mentioned, it looks very creepy, and I sort of like that you can't turn the head, because that adds kind of to the macabre, creepy, unnatural nature of this figure, this character.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I always liked opening up the cloak and seeing like the texture of, because they could have cut corners because most people keep that cape or that robe on, but they didn't. And he just looks tremendous. I mean, again, just similar to my comments on the Gamorrean Guard, this thing really epitomizes the unique situation that Luke Skywalker and his friends find themselves in, trying to recover Han Solo because of the unique, grotesque feature of these characters in Jabba's palace. And I don't think they could have been more imaginative and clever. And you talked about the screen accuracy of Akbar, and I totally agree. I feel like we come pretty close with this Bib Fortuna.
We did. Yeah, especially, like I said, the eyes. That's the main thing. The face. He looks like, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And really, all of these look fairly film accurate. Everyone that you mentioned and everyone I've mentioned. So yeah, again, that's sort of a tribute to Kenner and the advancements that they made between the time they started and when this came around. And when we get into the power of the Force, there's some missteps there, but by and large, those almost feel like they're from a completely different line. The way they're tooled and everything.
Yeah, agreed. Is there anything you want to talk about? You mentioned something at the beginning of the show about this line, about these figures.
I did.
You remember? What was it? I said you were going to say something about. Oh gosh, what was it? I can't rewind it because we're recording it, live.
Well, you said, "Ask me later."
Oh, why this line?
This part of the line doesn't really speak to you.
Yeah, and I think it's the one that do stand out. I sort of had to really extend what I would normally look for in an action figure, because if any of these figures that we mentioned, besides probably Bib Fortuna, because of the reasons I said, they probably wouldn't even come close to me describing them or even acknowledging them. And it's not that they're bad.
Not even the Gamorrean Guard?
The Gamorrean Guard might make it like it's not going to show up in my top 5 of the entire series of Kenner Star Wars, of course. I would say probably those two, but the rest of them wouldn't be much of a blip on my radar. And I don't know that it's necessarily that they're bad, because they aren't. It's just the others are so good. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and the only one, and what I remember what you were talking about now, the only one that I didn't really consider was Logray. And it's just because there's nothing against the figure. he just doesn't wow me. And I hated the fact that they, instead of giving him a hood, he had the little skull thing on top of his head, which would fall off all the time. And I have no idea where mine is. I know where all the hoods for all of my Ewoks are, except for Low Gray. Plus, he's got that belly and everything. He's a little tall. I don't know. He looks more like a cat than an Ewok to me.
That's fair. That's funny, actually. That's very good. So, any honorable mentions you want to talk about?
Well, the only other two, the Klaatu and the Rebel, the Indoor Rebel Soldier, really like both of those figures, and I love that Klaatu has the cloth loin cloth, as it were, and the Rebel Trooper always kind of confused me because I couldn't figure out. Hang on one second. I couldn't figure out why the pockets on his pants were down at his knees. That always bugged me.
Yeah, I can see that.
That was a fashion statement I could not get behind.
Okay. I don't have any honorable mentions. Like I said, I struggled to come up with 5. But I feel good. I feel good about my list. I really do.
Well, it's a good list.
Yeah, it is. It was fun. It's always fun to talk about these because you helped me to appreciate these, because nobody knows action figures as well as you, in my opinion. Let's talk about what is going on in the world of Marvin Dog Media as we close out this show. I know Talking Toys, one of my favorite podcasts of all time, is on a little hiatus.
Yeah, and the rest of Marvin Dog Media is on an unplanned hiatus as well. The Saturday morning Supercast and the pilot episode, we had planned to kind of come back after a month or two, and it's everybody involved has so much going on right now that we just said, you know what? This is all supposed to be fun, and when it starts to feel like an obligation, that's when you need to take a step back. So we're taking a step back for now. I am still doing Star Wars Splash Page with Matt Moore. We just had the episode that will come out this week is about we discussed the new Mace Windu comic, which is outstanding. I do not care for Mace Windu as a character. I love Sam Jackson, but I don't care for Mace Windu as a character. The last Mace Windu miniseries we got didn't do anything for me. This one, if the rest of the series is like this first issue, I am all in. It is so much fun.
Wow.
The story is great. The art looks like it was hand drawn, and it feels like a book from the 80s.
Cool. Well, that's high praise.
I think you're going to dig it when you get a chance to read it.
I agree with you on pretty much everything you said about Mace Windu, by the way.
Yeah, right. But this takes place before the events of the Phantom Menace. So it's even before all of that. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. So we're still doing that every week. And sadly, Dr. Aphra Volume 2 has ended, but the last issue that came out last week is phenomenal. If anybody hasn't read it yet, Why Do You Hate Comics? Go read it. But yeah, so Marvin Dog Media is overall on a bit of a hiatus, but the shows are all still available wherever you find podcasts. And Taylor and I are still around. So and Corey and Regina and Corey and Olivia and I are all still around. So if you're interested in talking about any of those topics, television, cartoon, cereal, toys, hit me up on social media. We'll talk.
All the good stuff. In the it's well worth your time with the back catalog, and you can certainly find Jeff on X and all the other places too, right?
Yep. You can find Marvin Dog Media, all those places, and you can find me on I'm just going to call it Twitter. I refuse to call it X. I am the Jeff McGee, and I believe on Threads I am Count Jeff, as well as on Bluesky.
I think that's right. I think that sounds right.
Yeah.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
Well, Jeff, as always, thank you so much, my dear friend. I'm always delighted to chat with you, and hopefully we won't take another 2 years to get back and finish these 2 waves.
Yeah, it's been closer to 2.5 years, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, remember, I'm not a math guy.
Wild. That's wild. That's what. Yeah, you told me that because I had just moved into this apartment when we recorded that. And
No
I could have
kidding.
sworn that we had done all of those since I moved here.
Same.
This is wild.
It's so weird. It's so weird. Well, we'll have to like ping each other. We talk every day, so how can we forget?
Exactly.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.